Hello, this is Gretchen Baskerville, author of The Life-Saving Divorce, and today I'm interviewing Marty Walden. In 2021, Marty was a homeschool mother and a conservative Christian who discovered she had HIV-AIDS. She had never been unfaithful. She had never injected drugs. It broke her world and her marriage. Here she was, a married woman in her 60s, middle class, when she got the most devastating news that completely shattered her. Now, 2 years later, let's catch up with Marty and find out how she's dealt with this disease and found joy and hope in the midst of this tragedy. Today, 2 years after the diagnosis, she feels the Lord is calling her to go public and start a ministry to others with incurable STDs. Join us as I ask her, how did you discover you had HIV-AIDS?
It was probably in the most surprising way that you'll hear. I had applied, this was in 2020, I applied for a new life insurance policy. And I don't have high blood pressure, diabetes or any of those things. And they turned me down. And it took me 6 months for the underwriter to actually send me a piece of paper in the mail that said, you are HIV positive. You might want to get counseling.
Wow.
And I was like, and so for 3 weeks before I got into an infectious disease clinic, I was praying that somehow this was a mistake. I was thinking, could it have been from years ago before we got married? I mean, there are just so many questions. And I went to infectious disease, indeed had HIV and the diagnosis of AIDS because my immune system was so compromised and the viral load was so high. And at the time, it was just like, and I actually told the nurse practitioner, I said, I'm holding the truth in my hands that somehow this happened and it wasn't my husband. But as the next few days went on and I became more informed about HIV and how you get it, it was absolutely the truth that it was from him. So one of us was faithful and one of us was not. So I don't talk a lot about his part in this journey because I want my YouTube channel and everything I do to be about recovery and finding joy in the midst of tragedy and hope. But yes, I had to tell my kids. It was terrible. I started inviting friends. I had a small group of friends that they were told first. And I had a couple of friends who really held my hand and made me keep eating. And we kept walking and we kept having conversations. And from the time of that diagnosis to 7 weeks later, I got a separation agreement and I bought a house and moved in.
Wow, 7 weeks? You did that in 7 weeks. From total denial, like this has got to be a mistake, to
the red flags had been there, even from before we got married, as I look back through our journey together. But as a Christian woman, I believed if you love more and you say sacrifice yourself, you put your husband first. And we homeschooled for 23 years. So we adopted and we homeschooled and we were active in church. And so we did look like the ideal family. So a couple of months after the diagnosis, I put a post up and said, well, surprise, I'm getting a divorce and I bought a new house. And
wow.
Blown up. It wasn't just me. And I didn't tell the reason for 2 years. It was just this June, so 8 weeks ago or so, that I went public with a very public YouTube channel.
So you just went public 8 weeks ago.
Yes.
And this is 2 years after the diagnosis. You're getting your mind around it and realizing what this means, the betrayal that this means, and then you have to act.
Yes, I've been in counseling. So there was a moment when my husband said, I'm done with you. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I'd been in counseling with my adopted kids because they have trauma issues and attachment issues and all that kind of stuff. But this was the first time I sat in counseling for me. And it was this terrifying and also empowering experience. And I know that if I hadn't done that this revelation would have shredded me into a ball on the floor. I could not have coped, but I'd already started doing the steps to speak up for myself, to no longer be silenced, to believe I was a person of worth. So I had done about 4 years of counseling when this happened. And so it just all in my mind, I went, oh, okay, everything you feared, it's not your fault. There is an issue with him and he didn't own it. He'll never apologize. There's no conversation, nothing. So that piece is hard to live with, but it's also and I tell people, which sounds terrible, but I say it was my get out of jail free card.
Yes.
It was permission from God to leave a toxic marriage that had almost destroyed my health. So if I had not found out, I had been to doctors. I'd spent thousands of dollars on natural medicine, functional medicine, all the regular doctors. No one tested me or him, as far as I know, for HIV, and he had been sick as well. I lost 25 pounds, which is, is awesome, but I was literally, they call it wasting. You are wasting away. And if with the diagnosis I got, with the numbers I had when I was diagnosed, another 3 years and I would have been dead.
Oh, wow.
Because they say when you're diagnosed fully with AIDS, when your immune system is so compromised and your viral load is so high and you don't go on medication, that the time is you have left is like 3 years.
Wow. And you look so vibrant. I mean, look at you. I mean, you look the picture of health. What has made the difference? Why are you not wasting anymore?
I started enjoying food. I did some emotional eating, but the medicine has, and what I've got many passions in this HIV journey. Just got many messages. There's 3 or 4 top messages that I want to get out there. One of the things that I have a hard time with when people say to me is it's just 1 pill a day. It's not like it was 4 years ago, which is true. But my viral load is undetectable. So the medication worked immediately to reduce that, which means I am not contagious to anybody else. But your CD4 cells, or your white blood cell count that they use to determine your immune system, mine were undetectable at diagnosis. Normal people have between 500 and 1,500. And the goal for a person with HIV is to have a count of 200. So after 2 years, I'm just at 125, and wow. they have said it's going to be a long haul for me. So I didn't miraculously get better. I think the first 6 months I was so focused on getting out of the house, selling our old home, figuring out what life looks like as a single woman. I was, physically, I started to do better. And then the last 18 months have been just this slow decline. And we have done tests. I have had procedures. Doctors kind of freak out when they hear about my CD4 numbers, that they want to make sure my heart's okay. I mean, it's a whole thing. And I think one of the things I'm supposed to talk about is I'm an older woman. I'm conservative, white, Christian, just none of those things that you think about when you think about HIV and AIDS. And so I believe God's given me a voice to talk about it, and the vulnerability to say, there are pieces of this that don't fit the mold, and surviving and living with it may look different for each of you depending on your body.
Well, that's what's so powerful about your story, because I've had people come to me and say, I don't tell anyone else this, but I got an incurable STD from my spouse, usually from the husband. And where do I go? I'm a respectable woman. I've gone to church all my life. Yep. I am surrounded by respectable friends. And here I've got HIV, AIDS, whatever. How did you deal with the message of I'm disease ridden, I'm plague ridden? I mean,
damaged.
I'm damaged. How did you deal with your self-respect and how you saw yourself?
I think there was such a release when I left him, when we parted. And he did. He said, I won't go to counseling, and I don't know how I got it, and I want a divorce. I'm like, cool. I mean, and it really was. I didn't know what anxiety I lived under, trying to please him. for all those years. And so when you get out, there's this sense of, wow, I can do what I want. And what do I want with, I mean, it took a long time to be able to ask myself, what do I want in my life? Because I would literally, in those years with him and my kids, I would get up and get on my knees in the morning. And I would say, Lord, help me to lay down my life for my family today. And while that's noble and honorable, I've also learned that I shoved any desires that I might have had. I was last place. And so to get out of that relationship and to develop new relationships with my kids, each of them differently, has been just and frankly empowering. Now I grieved a lot, and that's why I took 2 years to choose who I would tell. Mm-hmm. I would go sit at the infectious disease clinic, and I'd be surrounded by all men. Mm-hmm. I recently joined a community activist group for people with HIV. The only woman patient, no. But there are 23% of people with HIV are women.
Okay, I did not know that. Wow.
Nobody does. Nobody does. It's this hidden secret because it does have so much stigma. And I did a story on Instagram last night, and I said, I realized that by putting this diagnosis out there, I may have ruined any chances I have of ever finding love again. I believe God is completely able to bring someone brave and full of courage and love to me, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in. What does it look like for their health? It is a thing. I never thought I'd be talking about sex on YouTube in my 60s. It's crazy, but it's the cool thing is I literally started the channel and went, Lord, this is an offering. I don't know where this is going to go. I trust you that financially it'll start to provide, whatever. But my TikTok, it's to me is like the wild, wild west. And I had never done anything on there. And I started sharing, I just reached 1,000 followers, and a good majority of them are from South Africa and Kenya.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because their HIV is not under control. They don't have either the meds, or they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have doctors, like we do. And I really don't know, but that was like, okay, wherever you need this message to go, or just take it. Because and some, people say, well, I didn't even know HIV was still a thing. Well, it's still a thing. COVID kind of, we all focused everything COVID, but this is still a very real virus that can be protected against. It doesn't have to be transmitted. As long as you're undetectable, you can't give it to someone else. But if you don't know you have it,
right?
I don't know if my ex
have it, then you're just out there. Yeah, and
that's helpless.
Yeah, exactly. So you had been. I just want to back up. You had been feeling sick. You had been going downhill for several years before this diagnosis. It never occurred to you that this is what it was.
It never occurred to my doctors either, because I am not the picture of HIV. And that's one of my other passions, is to help educate the medical community that somewhere, maybe every 5 years for women or men, you go ahead and test for HIV, you throw it in with your annual visit. How hard would that be? Right. Nobody. My doctors were shocked as much as my friends, because my doctors are, 30 years, I've been with them for 30 years, they're just great support system. And then, and after the diagnosis, I had my first abnormal pap smear. So to find out then that I had HPV and had to deal with, I won't even go into that, but to deal with all the things that surround that, it was a lot. But I believe that, as I'm a home educator, and I love educating people, and that this is just another topic that I can share with people that you're not going to hear somewhere else. You're not going to hear it from a conservative Christian white woman. No, I was just going to say, but the support I have been given has blown me away. And I literally, TikTok is now getting a little weird. It's just weird, but comments, and it's just like the wild, wild west. So I'm on there just to kind of put out content, but the comments and things that I have gotten have all been literally on all social media have been positive. I have not gotten one negative troll saying, disregard TikTok, that's kind of weird. But I have not, and that's not normal. You put yourself out, you put yourself out there online, there are going to be people that just delight in tearing you down. And I believe that that's God's utter protection over my life, my mind, my emotions, over everything.
That is so powerful that you've got nothing but support, except for the weirdos out there. Yeah, we can't do anything about them. I want to also go back to another thing you said. You said that you'd been in counseling 4 years before you went public here about your HIV. Could you share with us some of the most important things your counselor taught you about finding your voice, about your own self-respect?
Yes. It's funny. Since I'm a writer, I write everything down. And since I'm 60, I forget everything. So, I go into counseling with a notebook, and I just, it's like this happened. And I would record our exact conversations, and I would go in and I would read it. This was before, this was 4 or 5 years ago, and I would read it and I would say, and my counselor would say, well, maybe if you approach it, we didn't know how to do conflict. He just disconnected and walked away. So we had no conflict resolutions. No conversations were ever completed.
You and your husband?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Right.
And I started to speak up for myself. It was, Marty, you have the right to have that conversation with him. So ask him, when would he like to have it? Okay, a week from today. Okay, I'll put it for the calendar. So he still had control, and I was going to accomplish us talking about whatever the heck it was. And we actually did marriage counseling, and he had seen counselors randomly. I didn't feel like there was a change in him from those times, but we went to counseling for about 6 months or so. And our counselor said, well, Marty has her own counselor here at this practice, Christian practice. I can work with you since I'm doing couples counseling. I'd like to work with you, but just one-on-one. And he never went back.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
So
when the pressure, when there'd be a counselor in the room who would pressure you to stay married, he was all in. But when it was about counseling about his own issues, he was out of there.
And I did not feel. I've just started going back reading, because I'm gonna write a book for whatever it is supposed to be about. And so I'm going back reading all of these old journals, and I just kept reading, and it's like angst, and it's just the emotional pain was so raw for so long. And to even begin to speak the fact that I am worthy, I am loved by God, if this marriage fails, and I've realized in my relationship with Christ that I was brought up in a conservative Christian home, and it was more of a checklist to please God than it was, this is how a relationship with God really looks like. And so when I got married, it was another checklist. How do I please this man? Walk on tiptoes all the time, make sure you do this, that, and the other right. And if you don't please him, you don't please God. So the things that you talk about and educate us women about are so vital in learning that there's an image that we have of God that may be incorrect, that we need to, through wise counsel, through the word of God, we need to look at what does God truly say about marriage and about those reasons that are valid for you to leave that marriage. And it was like the get out of jail free card. It was like, God said, you have my permission to leave now. We were together 34 years, divorced at 35, 34 years.
Wow.
34 years. And you go, why? And I'm like, because that's just what you did. The church tells you. I'm married for life. I made a choice.
Right.
And and I guess that when you say I look healthy emotionally, there is this return to joy. And a lot of it has been since I went public, surprisingly.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
I took those 2 years to be private, and I still did social media, and I talked about illness and I talked about the divorce, but nothing about him. And so when I came out with this is why we divorced, it blew. We'd have been at several churches. It would have blew a lot of churches. I could hear people. I could just see people talking, and it's fine. But this is the reason. I still have the same character, but this reason said, this man does not care for you. He does not care for your very life. It is time to go take care of yourself.
Oh, I love that message. It's so important because a marriage has to be safe and loving, or at least respectful.
Yes.
And undefiled. And,
yes.
You're discussing a marriage that had been defiled for a long time, defiled by his selfishness. And this was sort of the last straw. This was the final shattering event. And so when it happened, it was kind of like God released you and allowed you to escape and find relief from the toxic chaos in this home.
And I had been grieving our marriage for years.
Oh.
So I didn't just all of a sudden, oh, we're separating and, oh, I'm grieving. Well, I was grieving. I was grieving the family dinners that we no longer have because we're not together and my house is no longer big enough. And people, I have one kid who has walked away from the family, not necessarily because of this. I don't know why that this kid has not, the kid just stopped communicating. So you add that, on top of it. Plus I have adopted kids who've been through trauma and this is so re-trigger. I mean, it's just been a storm and it's chaos, like you said, but it's also realizing that I am so much healthier. I will live a much longer life. And he had been sick and he had diabetes and all the things. And I had been taking care of him for years. I no longer had to. I had to worry about what did I need to do to get physically, emotionally, spiritually healthy. And it is empowering, but it's not, I don't minimize, and you don't either. Neither of us minimize divorce. And when both spouses are willing to work, no matter how bad it is, it's possible. But when only one is willing to work, it's not doable.
Yeah, exactly. You can't it takes two people to make a good, healthy marriage that's safe for both, that is supportive and encouraging for both. And it only takes one to drill the hole in the bottom of the canoe while the other one is paddling. It's really neither of us take divorce lightly. Neither of us are in favor of divorce. Neither of us are proponents of frivolous divorce, right. But where there is a need for a life-saving divorce, a pattern of, infidelity or physical violence or emotional abuse or addictions that, especially the addicts who are squandering the family trust, the family grocery and rent money, these things are highly selfish. And if they're unwilling to turn from their sin, they are the ones who've destroyed the marital covenant, right. Not us. We're just filing for divorce merely updates the legal reality of what's existed for a very, very long time. Yeah. So I got to ask you this. Okay, so you mentioned that you have one child who's kind of drifted away from the family, and you've got 5 children?
We adopted a sibling group of 3, and we had 2 biological, but the oldest daughter we adopted, she was 10 when we got her. And at 14, we, through the right counseling, discovered that she'd been sexually abused and had brought it into our home. And so she ended up going to a group home and never came back to us. And then I had one other of my adopted kids ended up in a group home for a year. So they were very, very difficult years, but I look back and I carried our family. My parents were also getting older and I had to get them to a nursing. I mean, the stories I could tell, but they'll just have to be in the book. There's so much grief and loss that normally comes with divorce. It changes the dynamics and everything. Then you add in this diagnosis. You add in the relationships the siblings had growing up because mama was busy taking kids to counseling but I tried to have a relationship with all my kids and I thought I did. So to have this one who for whatever reason has walked away, will that person come back? I pray so, because they have one of our grandkids. And so I have no relationship with that grandchild, but I have my oldest daughter who has 3 kids and I am like, I'm their second parent, third parent, Nana, they adore me. And it's been such a gift, but it's been interesting to see what the kids' relationships look like apart from my husband and I. They
Yeah.
would come to our house and it would be the two of us. And even though I was the grandparent that got on the floor and wrestled and did all the things, it's taken them an adjustment. And they have asked, I said, why have you and Papa divorced? And I'm like, well, I'm going to let your mom keep talking to you about that. I said, but it's a very sad thing and a necessary thing. And I know it's hard to understand. And one day when you're older, I'll really talk to you more when you can understand more. But
Yeah.
I mean, they love it here and we have adjusted, but it's still, gosh, it involves so many people and grandparent. I mean, just, when you look at your family and you've got cousins here and you've got this uncle and it's just, with social media, it's so easy to stay in touch if you desire to stay in touch. But it was an explosion. There's just no other way of saying it. It shattered my life as I knew it and those of many others.
So you've mentioned that for most of your children, you're actually closer now. You have a more transparent, more integrity in your relationship. Tell me about how this has affected your relationship with your friends and with your pastors.
Well, this all kind of hit. COVID had hit, and this happened a year or so later. And my youngest daughter, who was the only one living at home, got married in February, and this diagnosis happened in June. And so that was the 6 months where I was trying to find out. And that's just me being me just being a dog and telling me, why did you turn me down? And I look at it now and it was God's provision so that she could have her wedding. And we were all present and there wasn't this, we would never be able to do that today. Because two of my kids, three of the kids don't have anything to do with him. So
with your ex-husband.
Yes,
okay.
yes. So with COVID, we had just started a church plant, and that plant didn't make it through COVID. And so we had not started going. We had just kind of started going back visiting other churches. Mm. So I have a pastor friend who I'm close to that I share the news with him, and they've all been incredibly supportive. And I feel like I've been in the wilderness as far as church, because I visited a couple that we had been at together, and just to go there, but that's not where I'm meant to be. So I'm visiting new churches, and honestly, the church I like the most is my daughter. My son-in-law is a youth pastor, and their church is amazing, but is 35 minutes away. So I'm like, but that's the one I'm going to right now. So it explodes your church relationships. There is no area of your life that it doesn't touch.
You don't sound to me like you are lonely. I mean, you sound like a person, and you come across as a person who's getting a lot of support from friends, from, religious leaders, from your own kiddos, their spouses. I mean, that's wonderful. And I love how you told your grandchildren, I'll tell you later when you get older. And in my case, I also had a situation where I couldn't really talk to my own little children about why why the divorce took place. And I actually told them, when you turn 21, if you ask me, I'm not going to come to you. You have to ask me. I will tell you anything you want to know. I will show you any court document you want to see. And that satisfied them. And later, when they did grow up, because I was divorced 25 years ago, they did come to me individually and say, okay, I'm old enough, I'm mature enough, I can handle whatever you tell me. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad I did that, because I told them. The older one kind of said, oh, I kind of figured this out, because even though I was only 6 years old, I overheard little snippets of things you said. Okay, this is making sense. Okay, this isn't a complete shock to me. Right. The younger one said, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And he was shocked. But I circled around with him and he was like, I'm okay with this, Mom. The divorce was so long ago. And I see so many other good reasons for this divorce, mm-hmm. that this is not a big shock for me. I mean, the news, the information is new,
Yes.
But I stand behind you, and I am so glad you divorced dad. And what a big thing to have your children support a divorce. It's huge. And I found in the Life Saving Divorce private group, which now has over 5,000 members, I did a really quick poll one day, and of the nearly 200 people who responded, 9 out of 10 of them said that one or more of their children were, happy or glad or believed that divorce under this situation was the best outcome in a really horrible mess of a marriage. And I just think that's always a blessing where that's the case.
Well, and mine were older. Mine were all out of the house. The youngest was like 22, maybe. And so, and we homeschooled, and they saw things, they
saw what was going on. They felt the tension.
Yes. And the words, yes, just yes. And they didn't say anything. Well, my oldest was, and we had this wall. When I told my 2 daughters about the diagnosis, we had this wall in our house, and it was family is forever. And then we'd all picked out a word. And then there were all the pictures of the weddings and the family portraits and all the things. And so that first conversation, my oldest said, "But Mom, you've always said family is forever." And I said, "It is."
Ouch, that hurts. Yes.
But I also knew she was processing something so unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't happen. I said in one video, it doesn't happen to women like me, but it does. It does.
It does.
So, and she's completely supportive. But they had to process, and it was like, well, can I drink after you? I mean, just the basic. What does this look like to have a parent that has this? What is undetectable and what is, so when I put it out there as an offering, I feel like there are people that are going to be touched by what I say and the information that I'm sharing that I will never, ever know. But I have had women in the middle of divorces reach out to me, and I've actually found a couple women that do have HIV, but they're either not brave enough to come forward, or it's just such a stigma. You just don't tell. I mean, like I'm in a support group in my area. There's just 2 ladies. And I don't think the other lady has told hardly anybody.
Oh, wow.
Like, well, my whole world knows.
Yeah. Now, before we go any further, I need to ask you, how can people get in touch with you? And then I have 2 more follow-up questions.
Okay. So you can email me at martywalden01@gmail.com. You can email me at marty@martysmusings.net. And so the blog is called Marty's Musings. My YouTube channel is under my name, Marty Walden.
Spell that for us.
MARTY and WALDEN. I kept my married name because I'm everywhere on social media. There's a brand recognition there. So I don't want to, lose that. Right. So I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I have a blog, obviously on YouTube. So the YouTube videos at the beginning are really establishing that my topic is, and I have a second one that's for the website, but I don't do anything on it. But this YouTube channel is to really help people with HIV. But I'm also starting to talk about divorce, and I'm also starting to talk about chronic illness. And because I believe that, this may be the topic and the people that will come to me, but there will be people that will come from all these other topics as well. But
this is a huge ministry. And I hope a lot of people contact you after watching this video. 2 last questions. How have your closest friends dealt with this? Has it gotten really weird? I mean, do they not want to breathe the same air? Do they, avoid you, or are they good with this?
No, I have a group of ladies that we just have continued on. I'm closer to a couple of them than the others, so they get more of the details and the nitty-gritty of things that are happening. But I have got people on Facebook that I've been friends with, and knew 30, 40 years ago. They have private messaged me, and I have reconnected in person and also just through online messaging and stuff with people that I grew up with, people that I went to school with. I did theater. So with people that I did theater with. So it's been this. When I say I've had so much support, that has just been, I think, what has kept me going on the dark days. You know, I'm supporting myself, my blog, the internet is a weird place right now with IA and all that stuff, and things financially haven't been as good as they were 3 years ago. So it's like, okay, what does this look like? Lord, help me just to do whatever it is that I can do in this body with how this body feels today. And yeah, so I feel so incredibly supported. But here's what I believe is the real difference. And I'm a real believer in storytelling. And that by telling your story, someone else is able to say, me too. And it got proven to me when I adopted and met up in person with women all over the country that had children with behaviors that we couldn't talk about to anybody else. And you go, me too. And so that's what I feel like I'm supposed to do with HIV, is to say, this is what it's like. And somebody's going there, oh yeah, me too. And I may never know it. They may never work up the courage to contact me. But the ability to share the story has helped even those in my close circle. I'll have a friend say, well, I said this to my husband yesterday, and that's not something I'd usually do. And I'm like, yeah, do it, you know, because the story, and I say our stories may be different, but the wounds are the same. We all have them. They just look different.
Now, when you talk about the wounds and the story, I've got to ask you this last question.
Okay.
Have you had really hard conversations with God where you've expressed anger, like, why me? I have been an upright, godly, loving wife. I've been sacrificial. I'm respected in my church circles. What did I ever do to deserve this? Why did you betray me, God? I thought that the righteous prayers of an individual would move mountains. Yeah. Where are you, God? Talk to us about your spiritual journey through this whole thing.
It's been one of, I think at the beginning, I think I did so much work before the diagnosis happened. I had worked through a lot of those questions to God. Like, why did I marry him? Why'd you let me marry him? Why did you
let me marry him? Right. Yes.
All those why questions. So I'd asked a lot, and I had been really angry over those years, as our marriage was just continuing to disintegrate. And I think anger's not my go-to emotion. Sadness probably is. So we've actually had to work in counseling to get mad. And I've started some activities where I look at one piece. So there's an activity in Lisa Turkhurst's book 2 books ago, where she says, I forgive so-and-so for this. I forgive so-and-so for this. And you literally put them down in note cards. And then you put something red on top of them, say, for what I can't forgive right now, the blood of Jesus covers, or something to that effect. And I did all that right before the diagnosis. And so I have gone back to those cards and added things. I'm angry at you because I haven't forgiven those things. And we spend an entire session on one card. Because you look at the impact of that person's decision. So if you look at, he modeled disconnecting from his family. And so my kids saw that. They saw me take care of my parents till their last breaths. They saw him completely disconnect from his family. So to me, having this child who's walked away, there's the anger. I'm angry at you because this child watched you do that. Mm-hmm. So, and I try really hard not to be bitter and resentful, but I feel like I'm also asking God questions that are natural to ask. He doesn't run away from them. He proves over and over that he loves me. But yes, why this? This is something that has so much stigma with it. Nobody in my life looks like this. Nobody in my life shares this specific wound. And in my group, there really are very few women in my main group. Nobody's divorced. I'm it, but they have reached out, some of them with their husbands, to help me in my house, to mow my yard, to literally, you're caring for the widows. I may be divorced, but it is like, I am the death of a marriage. And so I have people that have been kind in that way. But yeah, I've asked God why. But I refuse to camp there. I think it's okay to really dive into it, but I'm not going to, if I believe God is good, I can't camp in the place of, you did this to me. No, circumstances happened. I married who I married. This happened because of him. And now I have a chance to fulfill the purpose that I was called to years ago when I got sidetracked by laying my life down and not being the woman of God that God is calling me to be. It's just this full circle from my theater, from my music degree, from directing choirs, from teaching, just all those things I feel have come together into this place that I'm at right now to be skilled at what I'm trying to do. At least I hope I'm becoming skilled at this new arena.
Yeah, no, I think this is a wonderful ministry. And I think the Lord really often calls us to these kinds of ministries when we've had a tragedy. I mean, we do need some time to get away, to get to safety, which you did immediately. I mean, 7 weeks later, you were away legally and you were away physically in a new home. And I think it sounds like you attended support groups. So you had people you could share intimately your story with and listen to their stories. I imagine you met a lot of people who were further down the path than you were with this whole HIV journey. And I mean, you did everything that trauma recovery people say you should do. You spoke out, you're speaking out now, and now you've made it into an advocacy, a ministry thing. And I just applaud you and what you're doing, because this is the path of healing and recovery.
It is. And your book was the first book I read after we separated.
Oh, was it?
And I had a friend recommend your Facebook group. And I was like, but it literally, I think when you have a story that's as shocking as this one, those 2 years were necessary. And I very clearly felt God say, this is the 2-year anniversary. You need to get it together. Because when I do something, I go all in. And I have been more dedicated to this, getting content out there and learning how to make this a successful channel and researching all the things I don't know about HIV. So it was a moment when God said, it's time. And so as much as I love my website and the blog, and there's still tons of content and I'm still creating, this is my heart's passion. And I believe that actually I'm talking to a pharmaceutical company, just telling my story, because I feel like this is a voice, women need a voice in the conversation about this.
Great. Okay, last question. Sorry, I lied. One more question. You and I know that someone watching this right now has an incurable STD thanks to their partner. And maybe they've just discovered this and they are reeling with all the emotions. Look right in the camera and talk to that person and tell them what they need to know.
Oh, sweet friend, I have been where you're at. To receive the shocking news that someone has done something to your body without your permission goes to the core of who we are as people. But you need to find a doctor, a general doctor, your family doctor, and then an OBGYN, someone in that field who will listen to your story and advise you on next steps so that you can continue to protect yourself. And then I would say, educate yourself. Read the stories online. Google support groups for women with STDs or whatever, and take the time to really work through this. But what I always tell people is go to counseling. I will beat that drum till the day I die. Counseling saved me and allowed me to have a safe person to work through all the feelings about having a diagnosis that has so much shame and stigma to it. And so understanding you are a woman of worth, regardless of what has been done to you, and you are a survivor and you will get through it.
How do you pick that counselor? What are you looking for? What questions do you ask?
I just did a video on it. I haven't put it up. I ask on Facebook because I figure your friends, and you don't have to tell them why you're going to counseling. Just say, hey, I'm looking for a Christian counselor. Is there a good practice? Do you know somebody? You got to look at, can you afford it, or does it need to be under your insurance? Google the counselor, see if you can find any information, any articles they've written, anything about them. And then honestly, it's just trial and error. I was hugely blessed that there's a Christian practice in my city. And I've had 2 different counselors there, and I recommend them to everyone. And they're godly, but they also cheer for women. So if you don't mesh with that first counselor, say bye-bye and go try another one, because sometimes that's what it takes.
I'm so glad you just said that. It is trial and error. And you might go through 2 or 3 counselors to find the one who you really mesh with. So important.
Don't. I think that's what happens is people give up. And so I have family members and friends, and then I just kind of say, you need to be back in counseling, right? I know, Mom. And I can say that every now and then, and they know it's done out of a heart of love, but it is the recognition that you're struggling with some things, whatever those things are. And a counselor who is good and godly and wise will help you. It's worth the time and it's worth the money.
Thank you so much for your time, Marty. This has been absolutely wonderful. And I think it's going to save the lives of those who listen. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
If you benefited from this recording, you will find support and clarity in my book, The Life-Saving Divorce, available in paperback or Kindle on Amazon. You can also follow me, Gretchen Baskerville, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. You can sign up for my email list at lifesavingdivorce.com. Women and men of faith may request to join my private Facebook group, Life-Saving Divorce. For more on life-saving divorces, please subscribe and click the link to the next recording.